there, everybody, and welcome to the Alzheimer Society of Simcoe County's regular Facebook Live broadcast. It's Monday, April 19th at noon. As I mentioned last time, today I am going to be talking about an overview of Alzheimer's disease. So I did have a request to talk about some of the different types of dementia. So we'll start off with the most common type, which is Alzheimer's disease. So maybe we'll wait for a few people to join us today. My name is Erica. I'm an education coordinator here at the Alzheimer's Society of Simcoe County. So every second Monday at noon, I come on Facebook and talk about some different topics of interest. If there's a topic that you would like me to cover, please send us a message or drop it in the comments. I would be more than happy to talk about it. I'm always looking for some different ideas of content to talk about in our Facebook Live, so please do that. Maybe before we get started, I will talk a little bit about a special event that's coming up later this week. So the Alzheimer's Society of Simcoe County, like other Alzheimer's societies here in the province, we are a registered charity, so we do receive some funding from the government for our services, but a lot of our funds to cover the programs and services that we provide do come from donations. So donations from our donors here in Simcoe County, but also from our special events. So one of our biggest special event of the year is the IG Wealth Management Walk for Alzheimer's, which is happening virtually on May 30th. And so this Friday is the kickoff. And so I'm just going to read it so I make sure I don't miss anything. Okay, so we want to invite you to a special event that we have on Friday evening. The IG Wealth Management Walk for Alzheimer's is kicking off with a free online musical event on April 23rd. I think it's at 7, but there's lots of posts on our Facebook page, so you can get all the details there for sure. Featuring live virtual music from local performers B. Knox of Barrie, Sam Johnson of Aurelia, and just added to the lineup is Nashville recording artist Michaela Lynn. Registration is free, and please visit our website, which is www.alzheimersociety.ca, to sign up today. So it's a great opportunity, a free musical event with some local artists this Friday to kick off the IG Wealth Management Walk for Alzheimer's. And like I said, that's our biggest fundraiser of the year. And we do rely on the generosity of our community to keep the programs and services that we provide going. So please consider participating in that or sponsoring a walker in the IG Wealth Management Walk for Alzheimer's. So as I mentioned, and I see a couple people have joined us, so welcome. The topic today is I'm going to be doing an overview of Alzheimer's disease. So I know I've talked a couple live sessions ago, I think it was in early March, I talked about the symptoms of dementia. So we talk a lot about living with dementia. And when we talk about those symptoms of dementia, really what we're talking about are the changes that occur when somebody has a neurodegenerative disease happening in their brain. And so when we talk about dementia, it's not the disease itself, it's what the disease causes. When the disease is causing damage, what are the changes that occur for the person in their life? Things like problems of memory and problems with language, trouble recognizing sensory information, and so on. So what I'm going to be talking about today and in the next few Facebook Live sessions are getting down into, well, what is the actual disease process happening? So for most people living with dementia, and this is just under 65%, the disease is Alzheimer's disease. So that's the actual disease process happening in the brain. And so I'll be talking about how that disease is impacting how our brain works. So when we're thinking about those neurodegenerative diseases, it's good to have an understanding of just how the brain does work. So when you're thinking about our brains are not very big. If you put your two fists together like this, that's about the size of your brain. It's approximately 3 pounds in weight. So if you're an average adult, say you're 150 pounds, that's only 2% of your overall body mass. But your brain is like your body's central processing unit. What runs everything that we say and feel and think and do. It's our brain that is allowing us to do all of that. And so, that 2% of our overall body mass, it requires 25 to 25% of our energy, of our blood flow in order to power all of that amazing work that our brain is doing for us. And so, it's such an intricate system. We are only starting to scratch the surface of how our brain works. But it's when you think about that brain, it's organic matter just like the rest of us, and it needs to be kept healthy just like the rest of our body. And just like we can have other diseases that affect how well our joints work if we have arthritis, or how well our lungs work if we have something like asthma, we can have this disease happening in our brain that affects how well our brains work. And so, it's no fault of the person who has Alzheimer's disease, just like it's no fault if you have another type of disease. It's just as part of life that we can have these types of diseases that impact the health of our brain and affect how our brain is able to do our job. So when you think about that brain, so here's your 3-pound brain, about that big. Your brain has billions of special nerve cells in there called neurons. And when you think about a neuron, just like any other cell in the body, it has a cell body that keeps it healthy. Now, a neuron also has something called an axon. An axon is a branch extending from that cell body. And it is down the axon that the neuron communicates to the next neuron in the chain. So in order to do anything, like for today, for me to be able to take the thought of what I want to say to you today on this Facebook Live, and then go find the words that will help me communicate that thought to you, and then be able to direct my mouth, my tongue, and everything in order to speak those words. These are different brain regions that all have to communicate together. So neurons having to communicate with each other very lightning fast speed in order to be able to do all this amazing work that I'm doing right now. So when it sends that message to the next neuron in the chain, this neuron creates an electrical charge. It goes down the axon, which is how it sends the communication to the next neuron in the chain. And then it sends, when it gets down to the end of that axon, it tells the neuron to send a chemical that goes across that gap, that synapse. So a chemical is released, it jumps across the synapse, and it connects to the next neuron in the chain. It's dendrites. So the dendrites are where neurons receive information from other neurons in the brain. So your brain has billions of neurons, but it has the potential to make trillions of connections. And so, part of keeping our brain healthy is to help our brain make more connections between neurons. That's part of our brain health strategy. But when you're thinking about that signaling, so you've got the electrical charge going down the axon, it tells the axon to release chemicals, it jumps across that little gap, the synapse, it connects to the dendrite of the next neuron in the chain, and so it goes, right? What happens in a healthy brain is that when this signaling happens, then the brain comes along and it clears out the chemicals from that synapse, clearing the way for the next time that neuron needs to send a message. But what starts to happen in Alzheimer's disease is that the chemical, the protein that is created in this chemical messaging, it becomes misshapen and it's not cleared out of the synapse the way that it's supposed to. So it literally sticks around the neuron and sticks around the synapse, and it starts to clump together with other little pieces of this protein, forming what they call aggregate beta amyloid plaques. So you might hear when they talk about Alzheimer's disease, they might talk about plaques and tangles. So these plaques start to build up around the synapse outside of those neurons, and it disrupts the signaling, it disrupts the connection between neurons, and it starts to isolate those neurons from its neighbors. And if a neuron becomes isolated, it will eventually die off. So we start to have neurons dying within the brain. We also hear they talk about tau. So with Alzheimer's disease, they talk about beta amyloid and tau. Tau is another type of protein, but it is inside of neurons. So that neuron body, that cell body that keeps the neuron healthy, it needs to take oxygen and nutrients like glucose. Glucose is the fuel that makes the neurons go, makes the neurons be able to do all of those amazing work that it does. And it has to be able to take it from the blood vessel or vascular system and nourish the cell. So move those molecules, those oxygen molecules and nutrients throughout the cell and keep it healthy. Tau is involved in keeping that transportation system in the cell healthy and functioning. And what starts to happen in Alzheimer's disease is that this protein also becomes misshapen, starts to collapse on itself, and it forms what looks like a tangle inside of the neuron. And that's no longer able to transport those molecules through the neuron the way that it's supposed to. And so we have the tangles happening in neurons that are choking it off from the inside and causing neurons to die. We have those plaques happening outside of the neurons, which are also isolating them from others in the chain, which causing them to die. But it's also changes in the chemistry. So if you know of somebody who's living with Alzheimer's, you might have noticed that some days they're able to manage pretty well, and then another day they're having a really off day. And this is the chemistry part of Alzheimer's disease. That sometimes the chemicals are getting across the synapse where they need to go, and the messages are getting from one neuron to the other the way they need to be. And other days the chemical messaging is not happening so well. So now they're having a harder day. So there's both the structural changes in Alzheimer's disease, the neurons are dying, but there's also chemical changes in Alzheimer's disease, and that's what causes the good days and the bad days. But over time, you will see a steady decline in function as more neurons die off. Okay. So when you're thinking about Alzheimer's disease, it does start in the brain region that's responsible for memory. So one of the things we recognize early with Alzheimer's disease is short-term memory loss. It's our hippocampus area, and this is where the plaques and tangles start to develop first, and then they start to spread to other brain regions. And because they're starting to develop in the hippocampus, it means that the brain is having trouble taking information and making a memory, consolidating into memory. So some of the earliest symptoms that will happen is they'll ask you a question and you answer it. And then 10 minutes later, they ask you the same question, even though they were paying attention the first time. So these are some of the common early symptoms or early warning signs of Alzheimer's disease. But it is a progressive illness. So whether it's Alzheimer's disease or one of the other neurodegenerative diseases I'll be talking about in future Facebook Live sessions, they're all progressive in nature, which means that there will continue to be changes and damage that happen over time. We haven't found a way to stop the damage from occurring. We haven't yet found a way to reverse the damage that has occurred, so it will continue to occur. And it is important for us to realize that Alzheimer's disease is a life-limiting illness because we haven't found a way to stop the damage from occurring. It will continue to cause damage over time until it has caused enough damage that the brain just cannot keep the body functioning. And so it is a terminal illness. And, I've talked before about being dementia-friendly. As a society, recognizing this and knowing that the kind of supports to give people living with dementia, but also that it's not a disease to joke about. We often have those memory jokes or Alzheimer's moments, and for people living with dementia, it's not a very funny joke, so we need to remember that. Okay, so I see that some people are on, and thank you, Josie, for that comment. I'm always glad to see you here and watching. If you have any questions for me, sometimes it's a bit of a time lag to come through. But certainly send them my way, or you can send a message on our Facebook page. So I do keep track of the messages and try to respond to people as quickly as possible. So please feel free to do that. Again, with Alzheimer's disease, there's lots of brain healthy strategies that we can incorporate that can keep our brain cells, our neurons functioning the way that they're supposed to be. We do have a 4-week Heads Up for Healthier Brain series that's open for the public. And we're starting one, it will be virtual on Zoom, and it will start on May the 4th, I believe is the first session. So if you're interested in that, please send me a message and I can send you the details for that series. Those brain healthy strategies are so important. We want to make sure that we're keeping the vascular system flowing. We're keeping the blood flowing to all of our neurons. We're transporting the oxygen and the glucose. We're allowing our vascular system to take away the chemical debris that's been happening in the synapse so it doesn't have a chance to build up. So we want to be able to keep our vascular health is very important. Now I've talked about what's good for the heart is good for the brain. But we also want to make sure we're keeping our brains active and engaged, that we're socializing, that we're building our cognitive reserve, that we're eating a healthy diet. So all of these things help us reduce our risk for dementia. And research is showing that those plaques and tangles that's part of Alzheimer's disease, they actually start building up in the brain years before you start showing those symptoms of dementia. So you can be living with Alzheimer's disease percolating away, but it's not affecting your day-to-day life. yet. But over time, there can be enough of that accumulation of plaques and tangles that it does start to impact daily life. And that's what we talk about when we say living with dementia. So when we talk about Alzheimer's disease, they talk about that preclinical. That's when the plaques and tangles are present, but they're not causing any change in daily function. Then they talk about mild cognitive impairment, which is sort of you're seeing some changes in memory, but it's not enough to make a diagnosis of dementia. And then we have that, the actual diagnosis of dementia, where it's causing enough change that's impacting a person's ability to manage their day-to-day life. So we want to give our brains the best possible chance that it has to stay healthy and do the work that it needs to do for us. So I will end this by just stating once again about our tunes and treats that's happening on Friday night. So again, the Alzheimer's Society of Simcoe County. This is the kickoff for our major fundraiser of the year, and our fundraiser is the IG Wealth Management Walk for Alzheimer's, which is happening virtually on May 30th. So the kickoff is this Friday evening. It's the called Tunes and Treats, and there's live entertainment from B. Knox of Barrie, Sam Johnson of Aurelia, and from Nashville, Michaela Lynn. So registration is free. It'll be a great evening of music. You can register for free and get kicked off for our Walk for Alzheimer's, and I do hope that you'll join us, and I do hope that you'll consider walking with us on May the 30th and help raise funds for the Alzheimer's Society of Simcoe County. All right, well, it was a pleasure as always, and I hope to see you again 2 Mondays from today.